Okay.
Welcome to our webinar today. The topic, as you can see, is building and maintaining a book club at your library. Sometimes it's that maintaining part that's the difficult section of having a book club at your library. My name is Mary Ann Morey, and we have three panelists with us today. Kathy Van Manen, who is the director of Huxley Public Library, Mindy Farmer, who is the adult services librarian at Perry Public Library, and Jennifer Gogarty, who is the director at Slater Public Library. And also with us today is Scott Dermond, who is the colleague at the State Library, my colleague there. He is the consultant who oversees anything pertaining to state funding. So the accreditation program, the annual survey, Enrich Iowa. Scott deals with all those programs, and I'm sure he is a familiar name to all of you. And now you can see what he looks like. So. Well, today, our goals for today, our learning objectives are to help you understand how a book club fits with your library's mission. And we'll show you how it probably fits with your mission, even though we haven't seen all of your mission statements. We will help you learn how to start a book club, but also avoid some common problems or barriers. I'm calling them hurdles actually in the slides to book clubs. So if you've already got a book club, you'll still benefit from this presentation today, because you will also gain practical ideas to incorporate in any size library's book club. And I think you'll get some new ideas, some fresh ideas from our presenters today. And we'll also be sharing how you can locate resources for starting and maintaining a book club. So this is kind of the route we're going to take. We'll start out with the what, why, who, and how, all about book clubs, all the nitty-gritty details. We'll share a few resources, and then we'll hear from our panelists. And I think you'll really appreciate what they have to say, because they were asked to be here today because of some of the innovative things they're doing with their book clubs. Then we'll look at those hurdles and show you how to be proactive in avoiding problems. And then we'll look at going beyond, expanding on the book club notion and taking it just several steps farther. And we'll also have some time for questions and answers. You don't have mic rights, those of you in the audience today, but you do have the opportunity to chat. So please post any of your questions, comments, concerns in the chat. Scott will be monitoring that for us, because as presenters, we can't see it very easily. And we'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the session. So let's get started with what is a book club. That seems like a stupid question, right? What is a book club? I'm just going to ask our panelists. How would you define a book club?
Like they said, getting together and discussing a book that you've all read. That's the same, although Kathy has some ideas on ways to do that when they're not the same.
Anybody else? And feel free to chime in on the chat. What do you think is a book club?
I think it happens formally, like we're going to talk about here, in an organized club, but it also happens organically as patrons come into the library. Well, what have you read? What have you read? And they start sharing ideas. Those are great conversations.
Sometimes you end up with
those people.
I was going to say, sometimes you end up with an impromptu book discussion where you say, oh, I read that too. And then they start to chat about the book.
I think it's also an opportunity for people to experience a book in another way. So, there's different kinds of book clubs and people join them for different reasons. But many times it can be really great to join a group of people and find out, what it was that stood out to them in the book. What it meant to them, how they felt reading it. And, I sat in a book club before and had seen people have these kind of like moments where they're like, oh, I didn't notice that. Or, oh, that's an interesting perspective, and so I think it really kind of opens up this opportunity to sort of expand your experience with a book, because, everybody comes at it with different backgrounds.
Yeah, very true. Well, a book club by any other name, as you see on the slide here, you may see it referred to as a book discussion club or just a book group. Maybe it's a reading group or a reader's roundtable. It doesn't matter what you call it. And you may have some catchy name for it. I know a lot of libraries that have spirits at their book clubs, but either by going to a local pub, or maybe they bring in tastes of wine or something like that. They might call it Pints and Pages or Books and Brews. So they might have a catchy name for their book group, but they're all a book club, no matter what the name is. So why should you have a book club at your library? And just very quickly, panelists, why do you have a book club at your library?
I
Mindy,
think
you were saying earlier it's because you inherited it.
Yes.
actually, I think one of the biggest reasons we have it here is because of community. So we have a few different book clubs, and so people sort of gravitate right towards the book club that maybe meets their interest the most. But I think for many people, they start to build community, and it's a place to build relationships and be a part of something. So I really see that as one of the number one reasons to have book clubs.
Yeah.
I totally agree with Mindy. I've also heard from our members, it's a way for them to branch out and read something they wouldn't ordinarily pick up. I don't like mysteries, but you handed me a mystery in book club and I enjoyed it. So it's a way for people to try something new.
Yeah. Jen, anything you want to add?
I just think, like, I know I'm talking about kids book clubs today, but it's one way to fit that need for an adult programming, that where you can have that another way to connect and get together and meet new people and meet new friends. And so yeah, it's hard sometimes to do adult programming at libraries, and that's, I think, one of the easier and more notable ways that people kind of expect there to, hey, do you have a book club? I maybe am interested in that.
Yeah. I think one primary reason why libraries have book clubs is because it fits with your mission. And as I said earlier, I haven't seen all of your mission statements, but I'm guessing most of your mission statements, or perhaps in your strategic plan, you have something about promoting literacy or encouraging lifelong learning. And that's exactly what a book club does. It meets both of those goals. It also joins community. Mindy, what you were saying, a way for people to meet new members of your community. It brings people together for some community engagement and community involvement. And along with that, in community engagement, you're encouraging, oftentimes through a book, important conversations. It allows you to discuss topics that are civil and educational, and books can open our eyes to the lives and experiences, locations, ethnicities, circumstances of people from all over. So a book club can be an opportunity to discuss, again, civilly and educationally, about race or education, poverty, just issues like that. It's also fun. I'm guessing that you all have fun at your library. Maybe, you're not quite as wild and crazy as this group on the slide here, but I'm guessing you all have fun at your library. So we might talk about that as we move along. Who is another aspect of a book club? Who is the club for? And obviously that's going to differ from community to community, but you need to stop and think, who is in my demographics within my community? Who am I having this club for? Is it for retirees? Is it specifically for newcomers? Maybe it's a book club for stay-at-home parents, or like Jennifer is going to talk to us today about book clubs for teens. Is it a book club for people who only read romance or only read mysteries or sci-fi? There are all kinds of ways that you can think about the who of your book club. And these are just some examples of different types of book clubs that I found online, from some from libraries, some from not. But you can see Chicago does a senior book club. It's actually at a senior care facility. And when I was in another state working for another library system, I did a book club at a local retirement living, senior living facility. And I would take books to that facility and lead a book club there once a month. And the people living there just loved it. And I had a faithful group of attendees, and it was a lot of fun to hear their perspectives. In fact, a couple of times we read some young adult literature. And this was with people 70, 80 plus years old. And it was really fun to get their perspectives on these young adult titles that we were reading. You can see also on the slide that Des Moines Public has a rainbow meetup for the LGBTQ community in their area. I saw this was just a picture I downloaded off my PowerPoint, but it's an English book club. And I really like this idea because I've heard of this before, but I didn't find any actual examples when I went to look, because this one sufficed. But it's about a book club for English language learners. So you're all taking the same book and reading through it together and talking about it. So if you have maybe some immigrants, newcomers to your community, this could be a really cool thing for a library to do. And then this is a magazine article about a parent-child book club, which is a cool idea. One time it was a special event. There were all kinds of partners, and the library was just one of many, many partners that had to do with, they utilized the Mean Girls movie and the Queen Bees and Wannabes book. So it's been a few years back, but we ended up doing a book discussion for mothers and daughters. So that was kind of a cool event. So think about the who in your book club. Now we're going to go to the how, and that's what the majority of this webinar is about. How do you start a book club? And possibly more relevant to many of you in the audience is, how do you keep the group going? How do you resurrect a fledgling group, perhaps? And Mindy, you were fortunate to inherit some really strong book clubs at your library there in Perry, but some of you might have inherited a book club and it's two people, the same people that show up, and it's only those two. And you're thinking, okay, we either have to scrap this program and disappoint those two faithful patrons, or we have to find a way to put some lifeblood back into this. And hopefully in today's webinar, you'll get some really good ideas about that. So the first thing you have to do is kind of think a little bit through the process. And it does take a little bit of planning, but you've got a smorgasbord of ideas to choose from. So with the details, not only do you want to think who the book club is for, as I mentioned earlier, but you want to think about who at your library is going to lead this. Now, Kathy and Jennifer, you're both directors at your library and you lead your book clubs, but Mindy, you're the adult services librarian and you've been chosen to lead the book club. And Mindy, you're going to talk to us about multiple book clubs. Do you lead all of the book clubs at your library, or does somebody else do that as well?
I do not. We actually have a book club that is led by one of our part-time staff because she has a strong interest in young adult literature. So she wanted to start that. So she leads that. And we have a volunteer who leads our quarterly classics book club. So wonderful. We seem to have gone more with having it led by a person who has like an interest in, the topic or the style of literature. And I did teach composition in English, and so I was pretty excited. I inherited the book club, but it's a great fit for me and something I really enjoy.
So thinking about who will lead it, and those of you that are solo librarians, maybe you can reach out and find a local volunteer. Maybe there's a retired teacher in your area, a retired English teacher, or a retired English professor somewhere in your community that will come in and do this. So don't think that you have to do everything. Think about possibilities of how you could branch out and have other people lead, or maybe have guest presenters come in and lead and take turns with it. When will you have the book club? And that's a little bit of a, depends on your group. So are you going to have it in the daytime? And if so, you're going to miss out on working families and working adults. If you're having it in the evening, you might miss out on the seniors who don't drive at night. How often will you have the book club? Monthly, possibly quarterly, although that's not likely often enough to get people into the habit. I think most book clubs are monthly. Is that true for our panelists?
Yes.
You're all monthly. Yep. Yeah. And then how long will the discussion be? There is research about book clubs. I'll share that information with you in a little bit, but the research shows that people are happiest with their book clubs when the discussion about the book is over an hour.
Oh.
Yeah, it was interesting. I would think that 1 hour would be the sweet spot, and maybe 45 minutes is actual discussion, and the other 15 minutes is greeting and a little bit of chatting afterwards. But this research showed that people were happiest with their book clubs when the actual discussion about the book, not just the chit chat, was a little over an hour. So that's kind of interesting. Also think about where you'll have your book club. And I know you're thinking, well, we're librarians. Of course, we're going to have it at the library. But you could have it in a variety of places. You could, even if you just have it in your library, are you going to have it in your meeting room? Or are you going to set up some chairs in a circle and meet in the corner of the library? Maybe you have a fireplace area in your library with the comfy chairs and a couch like a living room. Have it in the stacks at your library. It doesn't take a lot of space to have a nice, cozy little intimate book club with 6 to 7 people. You just pull up the chairs in a circle. But you can also go off-site, and some of our panelists are going to talk about going off-site. So I won't steal their thunder here. And then what? What are you going to read? Is it going to be something you've loved or something you can get lots of copies of? Maybe it's a recommended title from a book vendor. Maybe it's going to be strictly a certain genre, like we mentioned romance. Mindy, you talked about classics. Maybe it's just going to be YA literature. And then what? What about food? Do we have food or not? We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then how? How will you encourage attendance? How will you publicize it? How will you formulate your book discussion? Is it going to be more of a formal discussion or an informal? Is it going to be by the book or off the cuff? So lots of things to think about, and we'll dive deeper into some of this as we move through the webinar. I just want to quickly share a few resources with you. I think these will prove useful even if you already have a book club, but particularly useful if you don't yet have one. I put this on here, and you can see from the pub date that it is an older publication, but this is a book I picked up out of a bargain bin several years ago when I was told to start a book club at a large downtown library, and they had not had success with book clubs just because in the evening, people didn't typically travel downtown. People didn't live immediately around the library. And I was told to start a book club. And I found this book and I loved it. And you can see it is book club selections and mouth-watering menus. It's a fun book because it covers a lot of classic stories that I think could still be good titles for a book club. And there's a theme for each month. It includes multiple suggested titles for each month, a blurb about each title, so you kind of get an idea of what it is. Discussion questions, so you don't have to come up with those on your own. And it has suggested recipes. So an example from this book is for September, the month we're in now, Banned Books Week. And it recommends as one of the suggested titles for your book club, The Color Purple by Alice Walker, which is, you know, that's a classic, but it's still an appropriate title that could be useful for today's book club. So that's just a fun title. You could probably pick it up secondhand for about $3 somewhere. So pretty cheap resource there. The State Library of Iowa also provides information about starting book clubs. We have a dedicated page to a book discussion group guide, and it includes information about how to start a club, how to lead a group, how to choose books, and it has a lot of linked resources. It also includes information about All Iowa Reads, which if you're new to Iowa, you might not be aware of this, but every year the state library chooses 3 books. Actually, it's a committee of people that choose 3 books, one for adults, one for teens, and one for kids. And there's a new title every year. We have virtual author visits. We provide you with discussion questions, and we provide book discussion sets that rotate through the state. So that's a really cool thing. And that might be a good way if you don't have a book club at your library yet, is to start when these All Iowa Read titles are unveiled and start with that. You can also do a Google search. I shouldn't say Google only, but an online search for book discussions, and you'll get countless results. You can see my result list up there, over 446 million results. So lots of information out there online about how to start and lead book clubs. Don't forget that the State Library also provides you with multiple lists, multiple copies list. So there are some libraries that actually maintain multiple copy sets that they will loan out to other libraries. So they may have 8 to 10 copies of a particular title. And those lists are on our website at the State Library. And a lot of times those libraries will not only have the 8 to 10 copies of the book, but they'll have those in a nice little tub or a bag that includes discussion questions, and assorted resources to help you with the book discussion. So National Public Radio, they just recently had in their Books We Love category, they just did like a podcast I guess it was, about book club ideas. So I posted that on here, and then they have a whole listing of books that they love. So these could be good potential titles if you're wondering, well, what do I choose? What's a good book club title? This could be an option for you. Also check out awards and lists, including the New York Times bestseller list, Publishers Weekly, Oprah's list. She's got, I don't know how many books now from her Oprah book club favorites that you could choose from. Reese Witherspoon has a book club, and hers are all listed there. The National Book Awards, the Pulitzer Prize Awards, those are all suggestions for how to find titles that might be appropriate for a book club. Book list has always been one of my favorite resources. Some of you might recognize it from the magazine type of newspaper magazine that may be available at some of the libraries in your area. And they always have a section for book clubs. They also have webinars, including archives that you can go back and look at to learn about upcoming titles and or things that are appropriate for a book club. Very quickly before we get to our panelists, this is that research that I was telling you about. This was aired during COVID, so sometime in 2020. Book Browse was a new resource to me, but it is all things book club. Recommended titles, read-alikes that aren't just AI generated. They are handpicked by humans there at Book Browse. They have beyond the book articles, genre lists, discussion questions, and more, and it's all free. There is also a subscription you can get to unlock additional resources, but the things I mentioned are all free at bookbrowse.com. And this was the archived webinar that's all about the research project that Book Browse conducted titled Inner Lives of Book Clubs. That was the title of their research, and the webinar is Building Community Through Book Clubs. And there was so much good research where they asked people, why are you in a book club? What do you want from it? What do you love about it? And so on. And that's where the research that I shared earlier about people want to discuss the book for at least an hour, it came from this research. The webinar also includes information about how to run multiple book clubs with minimal staff. It's a very interesting webinar, so you might want to check that out. You can also learn more about forthcoming titles and book clubs from multiple publishers. All of this that you see on this slide just came into my inbox within the past few days. So lots of resources. And if you notice Library Talk, the state library's discussion board, there's the buy, sell, swap group. And those 3 offers for multiple book club sets all came in with the past couple of days. So that's a good way to get some titles if you don't have any at your library. And then if you, again, turn to a search engine, you can look up book discussion helps, and you'll get a lot of resources there too. So I'm done talking for now. I'm going to hand the mic off to our panelists, and I have put them in alphabetical order by their library name. So that means we're starting with Kathy from Huxley. Tell us about your book club, Kathy.
So this was one that we started a couple of years ago when I wanted to branch out into nonfiction. So we realized that our nonfiction collection was very old and very outdated and needed some love and attention. And this was a way to kind of find out what people were looking for, what they wanted to read, and a way to just keep us motivated to be bringing our nonfiction section up to date. So we decided to start a nonfiction book club. And this was just the little blurb that we put out as advertising. All right, Mr. Dewey, we'll read you in order. And we decided to combine a couple of categories just to give people a little broader choice. And rather than choose a title, this was one that we went to where we said, you choose within this area whatever book you want to read. And that probably is what made this successful. We weren't handing out a title, especially in nonfiction, that someone did or didn't want to read, because even within that one area, there's still obviously a wide variety of titles and choices. So this was what we put out, and we tried to make it easy. If you want to just come to one, read one nonfiction book in this time with us, or read all 7 and come every month. So then we decided to make it more interesting as well. Well, let me go through this. Yes, we made a conscious decision to update our nonfiction. We needed a way for patrons to pay attention that we were updating nonfiction rather than just having it on a news shelf. So on our new title shelf in nonfiction. We had a lot of promotion about the book club, and used this quote that I really like as a way to get people interested. Nonfiction promotes learning and constantly exposes you to factual information, new concepts, and forces you to put the work into understanding what you're reading. So I think, and I know, Marianne, that you're a fan of nonfiction, but I think it does make you read differently. You're taking in a different type of information. So even translating that back to whatever fiction you're reading, you might glean some different information. But we knew it might be a stretch to get people interested. Do you want to talk about a nonfiction book every month? So how could we make it more interesting? We decided, well, this definitely needed to include food. So the first thing was make it easier. The only rule was to say within that Dewey section, but you could choose your own title. And then we would do this around drinks and dinner. But we didn't want to drag drinks and dinner to the library. So we had a great new business in town, Fence Line Beer Lab, that opened in January of 2020 after a couple years of really hard work to fix up their building, to get their brewery going. And then, of course, they were shut down right away. So as a way to kind of promote that small business and help them out, we moved the book club to Fence Line. So this is down on Old Main in Huxley in the south side of town. It's really it was a gift shop and a flower shop before it was Fence Line. So they did a lot of work in there, and they have a really nice outdoor patio area. So on nice evenings, we've always sat outside, and then we can talk and we don't bother anybody else. And the owners were all for it. When I said, what do you think if we move a book club in once a month? They're like, great, bring it on. So it was very easy to develop that relationship with them. So this is where we landed. We started in January of 2021 was when this group started. And we had 8 people show up at the first meeting, both men and women. And I say that because I've never gotten men involved in any of our book clubs at the library. Whether they think it's you're reading girly books or it's a girl thing or who knows, whatever. But with nonfiction, they wanted to come in and join us.
All right, I
So-
didn't mean to do that. I meant to go, let me go back. There we go.
Yeah, I just put the titles that came up in that first meeting and reading the first 2 sections of Dewey. The library book for by Susan Orlean, I think that was the one I had. I love that book. If anybody hasn't read it, you need to read it. It's a fabulous book about the history of the Los Angeles Library fire and other things, library things. Donald Miller is an inspirational writer. Sorry, Wrong Answer was strictly a trivia book that someone read. So a lot of different things. And what we would do in the format of that is meet at Fence Line, order dinner, and then just start talking, and just a rotation around the table of sharing whatever book you read, why you liked it, didn't like it, a typical book club discussion. But what happened month after month was people went back and read those other titles then. So it was a way to get good advice and what to move on to the next thing to read. This Quilts and Women of the Mormon Migration, that was a really good one. That was fun. So we went January through July of that year. It was a total of 51 people that read well over 50 books. We found new material, new interests. We did continue to invest in our own nonfiction collection. And I just wanted to add that the extra pounds came not from books, but because Fence Line has some really good food. We continued this also because it was fun and people liked meeting off site. We went from the nonfiction club, then we went to biographies, and we did a season of people choosing their own biography and sharing those. And over the summer, this past summer, we did short stories and kind of marketed that as, okay, you don't have a lot of time in the summer, but you can read short stories. And that introduced people to a lot of people to a whole new genre. They didn't realize how many good things were out there. I made everybody read Ransom of Red Chief by O. Henry, which if you haven't read, you should, because it's a great short story. So we will continue, I think, with different themes.
Kathy, when I heard you talking about this at a county meeting, I was just intrigued with it because you're right. I read almost exclusively nonfiction. And I think this is such a fun idea. And I love how you said you got men in there because I think you're right. Men often will migrate more toward nonfiction. That's being kind of a generalist observation. But I think if you look at your checkouts, you might see that a lot of the male folk in your community migrate more toward nonfiction. So I can see this being a good way to get some people into a book club that might not otherwise be in a book club. And I'm curious, were any of these people like brand new to the library?
I don't know that they were brand new to the library, but definitely new to a program at the library. They hadn't been in a book club before, hadn't been in discussions with other people before. A lot of them liked the idea of meeting off-site, and it introduced a lot of people to new topics.
And did you
And
give
the discovery
everybody,
of, oh, what was your question?
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you give everybody like, okay, you've got 2 minutes to tell us about your book, you get 2 minutes. How did you handle that? Because the books were so diverse.
Yeah, we didn't really time anyone, I don't think, but we easily spent a couple of hours. You were talking, so it was a time commitment as well. But when you're in that kind of atmosphere and you're enjoying an appetizer, never in my life did I think I would say I couldn't wait to eat at Fence Line so I could eat Brussels sprouts. But their Brussels sprouts are really good. So everybody just took their time enjoying an appetizer, enjoying a meal. And so we didn't have any hardcore timer to the whole thing. One fun story from this summer when we were doing the short stories, there were only 4 of us that showed up one evening, which was great. That was plenty. But one mom didn't have a place for her 10-year-old to go that night. And he found out it was a book club discussion. So he stood at the end of the table with I Survived Pearl Harbor and gave us probably a 15-minute discussion on that 100-page book.
That's amazing.
But it was really fun because we listened, and I think he felt valued, and he discovered that getting up and talking wasn't so scary, and he could share his book. So that was the intergenerational portion that we gained this summer.
That's great. Scott, I had asked you to keep an eye on the chat. Are there any questions specifically about Kathy's program here? If so, I thought we might address those right now. Otherwise, we'll say.
I am actually not, I haven't seen any questions so far, but there's a lot of good comments. People were commenting on your original presentation, Marianne, and then also there's a few things here about Kathy, what Kathy was saying, but that they've all been just comments and things that they're doing.
All right. Well, thank you, Kathy. I think this is a great idea. I would join a book club like this if you were closer to where I live.
We'll keep it going.
Next, we have Mindy from Perry Public Library, located in Dallas County. Tell us about your book clubs, plural, Mindy.
Like she mentioned, I'm Mindy Farmer. And so at the Perry Public Library, we have 3 main book clubs, and they all predate me. So I came on as the adult services librarian. It's been almost a year. And I think it's really fun how they reach out to different audiences. They take place at different times of day. And I think they meet different needs of patrons. So we have 3 separate ones. We have our young adult book club for everyone, which we call We Have Issues. And we have we have a monthly book club. And that one is meets in the daytime, and then a quarterly classics book club, and they meet 4 times a year to discuss classics that she
So Mindy, before you get too much further, I just want to dispel what a lot of people might be thinking, and that's, oh, Perry must be a huge library and they have all kinds of staff. But Perry is an E-size library, which is a mid-larger size library by Iowa standards, but you're not a huge library by any means. So I just want to clarify that you have managed to pull off 3 different book clubs with just a mid-size library.
Yeah, and I would say that the reason we have these 3 book clubs is probably because of the passion of the presenters or the people who run them, and wanting to continue and be part of these book clubs. So the part-time staff person who leads that first book club, she really wanted to talk to people about young adult novels and had this idea. And, she's in her 30s, and this idea that, young adult books are for everyone. So what I thought I would do is just do a little bit of a review of the different book clubs and talk about kind of who they appeal to and what we've done to try to get people to come. So here's what's similar about them. Each one has a set meeting date and time. So they meet, say, the third Tuesday of every month at 1 o'clock. So people know that they can put in their calendar a set time that they come every month. The only exception would be, say, if there's a holiday that happens. We schedule all of our meeting dates for the following year in December, and that's when we select the books for the following year. They're all led by a staff member or a volunteer group discussion leader. And then they all meet in the same location unless there's a special event that's organized. So 2 of our book clubs meet here in the Perry Public Library. And then we also have a Carnegie Library next door. And that has kind of, like you'd mentioned, a little area that's a little bit cozier and has a different feel to it. And that's where the Classics Book Club likes to meet. I don't know that 1 hour is set in stone, but definitely because we don't have a huge amount of staff and it is a big time commitment, and we need to make sure we have coverage for other things happening at our library. Realistically, the expectation is that most of our clubs will last about an hour for the discussion, and then they're all under the umbrella of adult library programming. Our first club is the We Have Issues, which we call the Young Adult Book Club for everyone. One of the things that's kind of interesting about this book club is that the previous name, Never Too Old for Young Adult Book Club, seemed to confuse people about who the audience was. So a couple months ago, I brainstormed with the staff member and we changed the name to We Have Issues to try to maybe help people understand a little bit better with what it was about. And I saw that somebody had actually asked in the comments who's invited. So the idea is that teens and adults come together to discuss only young adult novels. So far, the group discussion leader has selected the books, but I know that she has been talking about mixing up that process at the end of this year and trying out having group members pick some of them.
And Mindy,
yeah.
what's the breakdown typically of percentage? How many are adults versus how many are teens?
So far, it is primarily young adults. We were excited to have some college students home for the summer and some library staff that come and work part-time in the summer who invited their friends. So word of mouth got some participants who were in like the 18 to 20-year-old range. But admittedly, we have, as far as I know, not generally had a lot of teenagers come. I think that one of the things that we're working on is before COVID, there was a strong teen group. And then now we're building that up again. So I think that the hope is that we'll begin to get some of these teens that are coming into our programming now engaged in things like this. If you'll go back for just a second on the slide, just that this is a group that really wants to focus on book selections that include different experiences around gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, and more. And they are called We Have Issues because young adult books often cover heavy topics. The recognizing this, the discussion leader does try to choose something that's a little bit lighter, just because you read too many books where the world's ending and it can get kind of exhausting. Okay, I'm ready for you to move to the next slide. I don't know, maybe I can do that. Okay, so this group, Marianne.
She looks frozen. What happened to her?
Uh-oh.
Oh no, we lost her.
I should be back now.
Oh, there he is. There you are.
Okay, I have no idea what happened, but we'll pick up where we left off. And sorry, I think Mindy, you were just telling us that that your group likes to read some of the heavier topics, and so you occasionally choose a lighter one.
And so I'm ready for the next slide.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay. And so like I was mentioning, we expect that recruitment of teens to improve. And I actually covered this slide with your questions. I will say that word of mouth has proven to be the best way to recruit new members to this group. I really do think that is very important when it comes to book clubs. When people come into the library, one of the biggest things that you do as librarians is just have conversations with them. You get to know them. A lot of times for us, we know the names of our patrons and we're talking to them about books already. And I found that one of the best recruitment tools is to just say, oh, hey, we have a group that if you like, these types of novels or these kinds of books that they're reading them, and we'd love to have you join us. And in this particular instance, having that staff member who came and tried it out, and then she told her friends. So this, I see that somebody was asking if what the average attendance is. This one does not actually have the largest attendance. It has been smaller, but we've seen it growing a little bit more steadily over the last month. So generally 2 to 6 people for this group. Our
Two more to talk about, so let's move on.
Sorry. The next book is the monthly book club, where they read a variety of novels from different genres and eras. And they've made a goal over the last couple of years to include at least one banned book and a couple of nonfiction selections. The books must be 400 pages or less so they can be read in a month. Their book selection is democratic, and members submit suggestions and vote each December. Overall, their books tend to center on topical issues. Their membership has remained a stable 10 to 12 women, and many attend monthly.
So this is a traditional book club where everybody reads the same book?
Yep.
Okay.
All of our book clubs are like that.
Okay.
Because this group meets during the day, most members are retired, and that can put some limitations on who can participate. But they have indicated that they prefer to travel during the day, especially during the winter months. But my husband joined recently, and so I'm hoping that maybe some of that word of mouth will get out. And it's during lunchtime, so we're right in the middle of downtown in Perry, so people could walk here potentially and participate during their lunch. And in general, the members are committed to reading the books and actively participating. And I will say that the discussion leader style offers different group experiences. So the previous leader had a much looser style, and the group enjoyed fairly free conversation, while I was previously a teacher, so mine is more structured. I bring discussion questions and try to redirect people when they kind of go off on tangents, and try to, want to make sure that lots of people are talking. And as I've talked to the group, it seems like they see merit in both ways. So I don't think that there's one perfect way to lead a book club. And I did create some special summer library program events for this club because we had books and brews. So we had a new Scooters Coffee in town, and one time they sponsored our book club and brought in some treats and coffee. We also met in a newly opened Courtyard Cafe and had a cheese and fruit bar, which was kind of a special treat for them. And kind of made this a special atmosphere and made it part of our summer program. I feel like with this buzz from those special summer events and the end of the year book selections coming up, that maybe that will draw some more people in. And then we have our quarterly classics book club. That's the one that's run by a volunteer. She actually used to work at the library. And since they do meet less often, I think maybe they tend to go more towards an hour and a half with discussion, and they're in the evening. So I think that maybe people have a little bit more time to spend. And they tend to pick perhaps longer novels and more challenging texts because they're not trying to keep up with reading every month. This discussion leader is the one who selects the books, and they only focus on what are considered classics. And they have a committed group of club members who are primarily female and older. And it's actually a different group of members in the monthly book club. So one thing that I think is neat is that with the groups focusing on different types of books and meeting different days and different times of day, I feel like they're able to reach different audiences.
Yeah. Scott, any specific questions for any of Mindy's groups?
I apologize, Marianne. My connection dropped
Oh,
for
so did mine.
several minutes, which means I lost all of the chat. I did see several questions during Mindy's time, and it looks like she might have answered a couple of them,
Okay, good.
but you might have, I don't know,
Yeah, well,
Mindy,
if you
you might,
posted something as a question, go ahead and repost that in the chat if it didn't get answered, and we'll pick that up in a moment then. All right, moving on now to Jennifer Gogarty from Slater Public Library.
actually,
And
Marianne, I just had a question pop up.
okay,
So should we ask, this is from Lisa, and she says, do you buy the books or get them through interlibrary loan?
Okay, so we ask people to register, and if they register far enough in advance, they can purchase a book for $5 through us. So however our circulation person finds the books at the best cost, we will make them available for people to purchase for $5 if they'd like, if they're registered. We also always have at least one copy available at the library. And often we take into account whether or not Hoopla or Libby has these selections available for our patrons as well.
yeah.
We do a lot of interlibrary loan for our book clubs. We typically interlibrary loan copies if we're doing our traditional book club with all the same
Where
title.
everybody's reading the same, yeah.
And then
Okay.
actually, there's another question. This is from Heidi. We have 3 book clubs and only one meets here. How can we encourage the other 2 book clubs to try and meet here at our library?
Oh, so I'm guessing those are non-library sponsored clubs, which a lot of our libraries do have other book discussion groups in town that maybe meet in somebody's home. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. But my personal opinion is don't try to force them to meet there. For all you know, they're drinking martinis in somebody's home and they don't want to come to the library where they can't have their martinis during their book discussion. But I would just maybe let them know, hey, if you ever need a place for your club to meet, we have a meeting room or we have this space, or just let them know that they're always welcome. But that's my perspective. What do the rest of you think?
I don't think there's a reason to force a group into your library. And even if the library is sponsoring it, it's fun to get out of our own 4 walls once in a while.
Yeah.
And obviously,
I just think finding out how you can if there's a benefit to them to partnering or a benefit to you. So maybe they don't realize that there are some things that beyond providing a space that you could do together, which might mean like bringing other members, helping them get books, advertising. I guess just kind of seeing if there is a benefit to joining together that they might not know about.
Yeah. Okay,
there's
Jen, I think we're ready for you. Scott.
There's a chat comment on there that they actually get the books for their not our book clubs.
Yeah, I've got a slide about that in a little bit. Let's hear from Jennifer from Slater and your intriguing book club. And again, it's book clubs, multiple. You have book clubs, very successful ones for tweens and middle school students. And it's not always easy to get them to read period, but you got them reading and excited and discussing it. So Jen, tell us what you're doing there at Slater.
Yeah, so for the last 11 summers, we have done a tween book club, and we added middle school in 2018. So we've had several years of this age group. Actually got the idea at a Kids First conference back in 2018, and I wanted to start a tween book club. For us, summers works best. I think it works well for the kids as well, because they have more time to read. So we make it part of our summer reading program. And it has been very successful. This summer, we had about 50 kids registered for our tween group, and about 25 for our middle school group. So it is a very fun group. I always tell the kids that they are probably the most fun of all of the summer things that we get to do, because they get to do the fun projects, they get to read the fun books, and they get to go on field trips. So we really do promote it a lot, and the kids can't wait till they get to be the age to be in this group. So one thing to think about, what is a tween, for those of you who don't know, there's a couple different people who say the age range. The biggest range would be like 8 to 13 years. For us, we break that up based on what our school district does. It's just an easy way to do it. So for us, our tweens is 3rd through 5th grade, because that is what our school building is. And then for middle school, we do 6th through 8th. So some things to do to prepare for that is to choose your book, of course. So some of the things I think through with that are, we try to go with the summer theme that we are doing. This summer we did Oceans of Possibilities. And so you can see we did Daughter of the Deep for our middle school there. So I try to think of planning it with the theme, try to think of diverse characters. We want a wide range of appeal to all of the kids that we have in our group. I try to do something that is going to really reach those reluctant readers, something that is going to grab their attention, usually in the probably more of an adventure genre that will grab them at the beginning and keep them going. We do try to think of if there are audiobooks available, if there are kids who need an audio option to go along with their reading of the story. And then a lot of times, if I can, I try to pick a book in a series, because if you can find a book for a reluctant reader that they really enjoy, once they get done, they already have the next one that they can just go right on and keep reading. So I set a schedule for what we're doing, because we will do one book over several weeks in the summertime. So I have to go through and pick sections of the book as to where we're going to go with that. I give them bookmarks that tell them exactly where they need to be at for that week's discussion. The nice part about that is, especially in the summertime, you have kids who can't come every week because they have vacation or they have swimming lessons. So they will always know exactly where they need to pick up when they come back if they miss a week. And then we plan different activities to go with our book discussions or field trips. And then, of course, planning your questions that you're going to have every week, which requires a lot of, it's a little different from adults, where you have to read, take notes, write down questions, and have things ready to go for them.
So 2 things before I advance to your next slide. This picture of the kids here in the discussion, I just want to point out that's in the main part of your library. That is not a meeting room. That's not an offsite place. That's smack in the main section of your fairly small library facility. And you've got all those kids, and you just set up the tables there in the main part of the library. I think that's kind of cool. You didn't let space constrain you. You didn't say, well, we don't have room in a meeting room. You just did it in the main, in the stacks, as it were. Yeah. The other question, I'm sure other people are wondering if they haven't actually posted in the chat. Do you have kids that read ahead?
So you see on the little bookmark there, it says read to this and stop. And right. They have learned, I'm very much a stickler about that, because I hate spoilers and I have taught them to also hate spoilers. The first couple years I did it, you would always have the one kid who would say something and spoil it. It was just, it was terrible. So I really have ingrained in the kids, like, you need to stop when we get here. And if you don't, I don't want to know about it. Like, you need to keep it the best secret in the world that you know anything else. So, but on top of that, I do give incentives as well for that. So they do get a little treat or something for finishing their reading for that day and stopping where they were supposed to. So they have that little extra incentive to do that. So once you get going on the program, and you have that first meeting, you pass out books to all the kids. Now, we are very fortunate. We get, I send out letters for our summer reading program. We have businesses that contribute. So we are able to buy copies for all of our kids that they can keep. Interlibrary loaning 50 copies of a book or purchasing that on our own would be hard. So we are able to give those books, and that's always another fun thing that they get with our summer reading program. But for the first one, we will pass out the books. So they will get that with their bookmark. You need to promote excitement for them. There are book trailers out there. There are videos with author interviews and things like that. So, getting them really excited about, this is what we're going to read about, and here's what the story is, and here's what some of the, characters are going to be. And then also giving them those expectations of how to use their bookmark, where we're going to read to, that you do need to stop. We're not going to have those spoilers. Also talking about with these kids, especially the tween group, that upper elementary group, reading is very different for this. And so we really emphasize the skill of reading for details, of that comprehension that is needed for school type learning and school type reading. You read very differently when you're just reading for fun, and you can pick out, what you want. You might skim through things. But for this, I'm really wanting them to be aware of what they're comprehending and looking for certain details. We do a Battle of the Books competition in our school district every year. And this is a skill that is needed for that. And so we're also trying to work with the schools to show them, what things they need to be picking out in the stories when they are reading. Mm-hmm. So once you get to that weekly discussion, we have different questions that are planned. So we'll discuss the story in itself and the progress of the story and the plot that has happened in the section that we've read. But I also have bonus questions and incentives for them to answer those questions. So again, they're kind of a Battle of the Books type of question. So it could be, we're talking about the plot and what happened, and I'll be like, okay, bonus question. What was the name of the store that the grandfather owned? And they need to tell me what that is. And if they do, then they, get something for that. It could be a sucker or a Smartie or something like that. But it keeps the kids really engaged. They get quite competitive at times. It makes them want to read the stories and really pay attention to those things. And it gets, as you could see in the picture from the previous slide, like they're all like raising their hands. They want to talk. They want to answer the questions. They're really excited when they can pick out some of those things. Another thing to add to your discussion would be educational tie-ins. This summer, one of the things in our book was about a hippo and how big his teeth were. Well, we actually, measured out how big is a hippo's tooth, and to see the scope and scale of that was just mind-blowing for them. Just something as simple as getting out a yardstick and showing them how big that was. So, all stories have different historical components at times, or just fun facts. And so to go and add that as part of your discussion is always a fun thing to do. And then along with that, something you don't do, maybe we should do with our adult book clubs, is add in an activity portion. But we'll do a discussion generally for like 20 to 30 minutes. And then for the other rest of the time, which we usually have about an hour, we have a different activity to do. So it could be a craft activity that we have planned. It could be a special speaker, something like bike safety, or you can see some of the pictures there, an experience. You could play a game. We've had hoop dancing. That middle picture is a local teen drama troupe who came and worked on improv with the kids. We've had a harpist come, and we had several of the kids learning, having some experience with music. So there's a lot of different things that you can incorporate into it to make it a really fun experience for the kids. One of the other things that we do every summer is we take field trips, and this is rare for a lot of places, but it has been very rewarding and fun for us. We've done many, many different things. There is always a reading and attendance requirement to go on the field trip. For us, since it's a summer over like 5 or 6 weeks, the kids need to have attended like 2 to 3 of the sessions, and they need to have their book done. So even if they didn't keep up with their reading every week, and some kids won't be able to do that, they need to have finished the book by the time that we go on the field trip. We always have permission slips signed well in advance so that the parents know where we're going, what's needed. We always take sack lunches with us. But we've done many different things, from going to the children's theater, going to a Perfect Games and Ames, which has laser tag, arcade games, mini golf. We packaged meals for Meals in the Heartland one time. We went to Camp Dodge to do their training course that they have. The picture on the far right is bouldering at Jester Park. That is really cool. They have archery there. We did some hiking. So a lot of things. We're fortunate to be in central Iowa, where we have a lot of resources available, but we don't have these things right in our town. So transportation is necessary. For us, we have parent transportation, parents who volunteer to do that for us with permission slips. They're given permission from other parents to carpool. So we're able to do that. I know some libraries are able to get school buses to transport. If you're, in a city who has public transportation, that might be a possibility for, but generally parents are very happy to, especially in the summertime, you have more parents available to drive kids. So.
And I just want to clarify that your field trips have a direct tie-in to the book that you read.
Yeah. And then there is a list here in case anybody wants to screenshot this, or if Marianne can get it out later, but I know that's one of the hard things. It takes a lot of proofreading of books through the summers to find one, especially when you're trying to find a certain theme to go with your summer reading program. So these are the books that we have done in the past if you need some good ideas. So far, we haven't done any duplicates of books, but I have done some duplicate authors before, because they just really lend themselves well to those genres that are great for that all kids enjoy.
All right, Scott, any specific questions for Jen's group here, her teen book discussion clubs? I think this is such a fun idea, because this is an age where they're not too keen sometimes on reading, and you've got them clamoring at the door, it sounds like. I don't know, did we lose Scott again?
He
Maybe
looks a
we
little
did.
frozen. I can see the chat, Marianne. I don't know that there were
Yeah.
any questions.
Okay.
People would like the slides, the book list.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can make a PDF of the slides available.
Mhm.
All right, we've got a few minutes left for our presentation, so I want to just talk a little bit about some of the questions and things to ponder and some hurdles. So, food or no food? Kathy, food works well for your group. Mindy, your groups all meet there at the library. Do you have food for all of your groups?
We don't.
No,
Yeah.
and they do just fine without it, right?
Yep. So it was just, I think that actually made the times when we had food kind of special. It's like a special occasion thing.
Mm-hmm. I was at a county meeting recently, and the reason I have this on the slide is because this group was talking about book clubs, and one of the librarians there said that food at the book club had actually become a divisive issue for the club, because there were certain people in the club who loved to bake, and they would bake things and bring them to the book club. And there were other women in the group who couldn't bake or didn't want to bake and didn't want to be responsible for bringing a treat. And they refused to eat the treats. And that upset the people who had brought the treats. So.
We had a similar thing happen with our evening book club here. It almost got to be a competition. And it reached the high point. They read Fahrenheit 451, and people brought it. A woman came in with creme brulee and a torch. Could she burn it off? Yeah, along with what's the cinnamon whiskey, Fireball whiskey. I mean, and so it was really fun, but they reached this almost competition level, and the group has lost some members because of it.
Yeah.
And it's one of our other librarians that leads that group, and every time she would say, nobody has to bring any food. You're not required to bring any food. That's not a requirement to come to books. She would try to make it a little more user friendly, but that is very real. So I set some standards for the food would be.
I will
Yeah,
just,
I
I will
think you
just
did
say that we
good.
had a few activities. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. We had a few summer activities where I partnered with local businesses and we went into them to have the activities for adults. And I had arranged to have some food purchased through them, but surprisingly, like at a coffee shop, it's kind of fun to have things at a place like that where people can opt in to buy food if they want to. Because a lot of them were like, oh, we don't need the library to get us things. We're happy to support this business. We're happy to buy our own coffee. So that's also another maybe bonus of going someplace besides the library. If you can kind of support a local shop or business, and then people in general, I found, are perfectly happy to buy something if they want to.
I'll just say, be careful of supplying treats yourself, because that might be an expense and or a habit that you don't want to start for your library. So, it's up to you. I think you need to know your group and go from there. What about rules or no rules? Do you have any rules for your book club as far as the discussion? And if you do, how do you convey those without sounding like a school marm?
We talked a little bit earlier about had you read the book or not. And I would say one of our rules is we don't care if you finish the book or not. Still come.
Yeah.
Be socialized, be part of the group, maybe be encouraged to go back and finish it later.
So nobody's
I think I was cutting out. I don't know if you heard all that.
No, yeah, I heard it.
Okay.
Nobody's had to set any ground rules like you must allow other people to speak, or you must respect everyone's opinion, or anything like that.
Mm-mm. There's a few times we have a couple of members that will come and they don't say a word. And one of my other librarians is great about drawing them out. So we probably have.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the importance of having a good facilitator. Not really a leader, but a facilitator, somebody who can draw those questions out, somebody who can quiet down the one person and help the shyer person speak up a little bit. So that's why we said earlier, who's going to lead your club? Maybe it's not you. Maybe there's somebody else at your library that has that special gift and ability to serve as a facilitator.
I will add to that, Marianne, that I have a staff person who's really good about having a question that doesn't necessarily relate to something that happened in the book, but something that everybody can answer, whether that's, tell us about your wedding gown and how you found that, or tell us about a vacation that you took that was your favorite, or something like that, so that everybody has a chance to say something.
Yeah, and I think that's good that I'm going to assume that in the book somebody got married. So that's a really good kind of question that ties in with the book, but doesn't put somebody on the spot for being able to expound on what they read. So gives everybody a chance to talk. We kind of alluded to this earlier, I think, from somebody in the audience asked a question about outside book clubs. And this slide again was developed because of a county meeting I attended where one of the librarians had been having troubles with those non-library sponsored clubs being extremely demanding of the library. It was like they had come to expect the library staff to just drop what they're doing, order us these books, get them into us by the end of the week. Not always coming to get the sets when they had been ordered. So as this particular librarian mentioned, she said a big problem is that book clubs cannot order books that are less than 1 year since publication. So, when we do our multiple copies and interlibrary loans and things like that, and of course, those outside book clubs often want to read the newest published books. And so they get angry at the librarians and when we can't get the books. The clubs would often request sets of books, but no one would pick them up. So this particular librarian said, we now charge if they don't pick up these book sets. And I know that on Library Talk thread, which for those of you not familiar with Library Talk, that is the Iowa book discussion thread, there is a thread on there about book club issues. So you might want to look at that and you'll see some more solutions for that. And in fact, if you just do a search in Library Talk for book club, you will find a lot of scenarios there with solutions. There were over 50 threads on the topic when I looked. But make sure that you have a good interlibrary loan policy so that those outside groups know what that is. Make sure you have a meeting room policy if those groups are using your meeting room policy. Make sure you have a good circulation policy so that these groups understand what happens if somebody loses a book or they return it late. So those are some things to think about if you're consistently getting orders from outside book clubs to utilize library resources. What about the hurdles? We've got a few minutes to go through some of these, just to very quickly give your responses. What do you say if somebody says, oh, I can't start a book club. I'm a solo librarian. I have limited hours. I don't have time to do a book club. What would you say to that?
I would look for a volunteer. One of your good patrons that obviously loves to read. I think that would be a great way to use them.
Anybody else?
I'd ask the person who's requesting it to be that person.
Yeah, somebody asks, hey, I wish your library had a book club. Say, I think you're the person to start it.
And I think consider after hours. Our evening book club, we close at 7 Monday through Thursday. The evening book club starts at 6:30. So we're always here till 7:30, 8 o'clock. I consider those after hours times, I think is also okay.
A couple of other options I had here is to partner with the other librarians in your community and take turns leading a county-wide book club that rotates from location to location at the libraries in your area. That would be one way that you wouldn't have to do it every single month. You'd only maybe have to do it once, maybe twice a year instead. And then Mindy, you referenced audiobooks. You can often read a book via audiobook while you're commuting to work or exercising or washing dishes, cleaning house, whatever. So that might be a way to get the book done. Maybe you don't have the time to sit and read the 300 pages, but you can get it done via audiobook that you put on the 1.5 speed. Fast speed read.
Sometimes people come to a librarian, right, and they say something like, I think I need why don't we have book clubs? And you talk to them and you ask them you're kind of like ask some questions to figure out what it is they're really looking for. And sometimes genuinely they want a book club, right? They have a passion for certain types of book and they want to talk about them. But sometimes it's not that you need to start a new book club. Maybe it's some other need that they actually need to have met. So I definitely think that there's a big investment in book clubs and they're worth it. But I really like that idea of saying, oh, hey, would you like to lead that RB Engage?
Or at least help pick the titles. Yeah,
like, it's one thing to be like, oh, you should start a book club and do all this work and then set it up and maybe I'll show up. So what is it that they're really looking for? And if it's a book club, that's great. And how do they want to be involved in starting that? Otherwise, maybe there's really some kind of other connection or thing that you have if they're not really invested in it.
So you might be thinking, oh, but I don't know what they like. I don't know what my community would like. And to that, I would say, well, maybe do your research, get to know your community, find out what they're checking out, what circulates at your library. That would be a great way to determine, wow, my romance just flies off the shelf. Maybe if I start a romance club, book club, that would be a good start. What about the rest of you?
I go back to the fact that our group really likes being pushed into reading what they don't ordinarily. So we have used that as a marketing or sales tactic to say, all you read is romance. What if you join us and read this?
Yeah.
Well, nonfiction or a thriller or a deep mystery, try something new. You might find a little romance in there and you'll like it.
Well, I really like how the monthly book club has challenged themselves, say, we want to make sure that we're reading at least 1 or 2 nonfiction picks.
We do the same.
We want there to be at least 1 banned book in here. And so I was actually looking up for the new year, what are some other types of things that people come up with that help them pick books? So that might be, I like that idea, like what kinds of ways do you want to challenge yourself as a reader, or what topical things, stuff like that might, push your book selections in different directions.
Yeah. maybe the librarian is saying, well, I just don't have enough books. I'm a small library. I don't have enough books. And yeah, we get that because we're all struggling with our budgets. We all would like to have more books than what we do. But I think we've already pointed out that the state library has those lists of multiple copies. So you know which libraries to contact to get the sets. You could claim some of those free sets that are always being posted on Library Talk. There again, you could do a county-wide read and buy or share the sets of books with other librarians in your area. You could do the All Iowa Reads because the state library always has sets of those books available. Maybe you just read on a theme or a genre. So kind of like what Kathy did, you're going to pick nonfiction from the hundreds this month. And that way you don't have to have 10 copies of the same book. That's a really good way to do a book club if you have limited books. Or this month we're all reading a mystery book, or we're going to read true crime. And I know there are some book clubs that read cookbooks. And a lot of times those groups are called Cook the Book, and people choose a cookbook and read it. And then they bring a recipe that they've cooked to the club so that people can try it. And that's a fun book club too. Kind of goes back to our question about to have food or no food. That one's kind of a requirement for that particular kind of club. But kind of think about ways you don't have to have multiple copies of the exact same book if you feel that's going to be problematic, or just make it a read what you want to read kind of book club where everybody comes and just talks about what they're currently reading. So lots of solutions for that.
We've done that and offered the food. We've done it a couple of times where whatever you're reading, bring food from where the book is located, or does the patron have this, or does the character eat a snack throughout the book? Bring that snack. And that's been fun.
Oh, that is fun. That's a good idea. All right. True confessions. How many of you have ever had to lead a book discussion where you had not read the book? My hand is the first to go up.
For sure.
There are ways to do this. And it might be legitimate reasons why you didn't get the book finished, that you got sick, you couldn't finish it, or you hated the book after you chose it and you couldn't get past the first chapter. Life just happens. So what are the fixes? Well, we mentioned about listening to the audiobook on fast playback speed, but there are so many generic book discussion questions that you can utilize that will apply to any book. And the one time that I didn't get a book read, notice I said only one time, the one time I didn't get a book read for a book discussion group, I started off the discussion with thumbs up or thumbs down to see what people thought of the book. And it was about half and half. And so I just started asking people, so why didn't you like the book? And you said you did like the book. Why did you like it? And most of our discussion time was spent just on that. Nobody knew, I don't think, that I hadn't read the book. So there are ways that you can get around that. What about the rest of you on the one time that you didn't get the book read?
I was flat up honest. Just said, okay, people, you're on your own.
To research about the authors and find interviews where they've talked about their experience writing the book or what inspired them. I mean, there's all kinds of things on the internet. I like to read like reviews of the books, like from popular reviewers to find different quotes. I mean, I don't know. There's lots of ways, honestly, to get the sense of a book. And I'll be honest, like as a teacher and things, there's lots of ways to lead a book without reading it, to be honest. Especially if you know that your goal is to get other people talking. Then, of course you want to have read it and bring your ideas in. But there are many ways to like successfully lead something by bringing in a lot of interesting information that people might not have considered or, didn't read, and asking them to consider, does knowing this about the author make you consider the book any differently? Like stuff like that. I think that has really helped me. What
do you do if nobody attends? Have you ever had this happen?
I've never been completely skunked, but I've had just, one or two, and we'll have a nice 5-minute talk, or it might be a 30-minute talk, but I don't think you don't quit. Okay. Maybe ask, if you had X number of people pick up a copy of the book and none of them showed up, contact them. was it really that bad? Did you have a time
Mhm.
conflict? Do we need to change the time? Do we need to change the genre of what we're doing?
Yeah.
If you just have a one-time shot where nobody shows up, don't drop it. Don't give up.
Yeah, I would also say, make sure you're checking the community calendar in your area. What's happening?
What else is going
Did you
on?
schedule it on the night of the big football game? In which case, that was your fault. You should have looked at the
Mhm.
calendar in the community a little bit more closely. Did you maybe need to market it more? I don't know. And also maybe examine what title did you choose. Maybe you just love Westerns and you chose a Western for your book discussion group, but the Westerns rarely circulate at your library. Well, maybe that was part of it. Again, start with something that you know people will like
Mhm.
and then branch out from there. So that would be some recommendations for that hurdle. Kathy, this goes back to what you said. If you only had one person show up, let's say you only have two people show up, but you're one of them, and this happens for several months. What do? How do you decide you're going to pull the plug on that particular club, or how do you revitalize it and start over?
Can I share this idea I had? And we're just starting to try it out, but I was like, how can we get these books, more front and center? And we have like a new book section in our library. And I just started doing this, but where a lot of times we'll display, books out like this. And so I was taking the flyers I'd made and kind of making them the size of the book and laminating a little bit. And then you can flip them over and it has a description of the book and it tells you about the book club. So basically put it under the book. And even when the book's gone, it still advertises the book club. And I've actually been noticing that the ones I have out for the book clubs, that those books are going. And so hopefully it's just another way for people to see there's this book club happening. This is the book that you might grab in the moment when they're looking for a new book and they're open to that, trying something new. And because I think sometimes people hear book club, honestly, and they're like, ugh, but like, oh, this is an interesting book that maybe I'll try. And then, kind of leads them to knowing that the next step is the book club.
What do you do when nobody talks? Because it is supposed to be a book discussion club. What if nobody discusses? Have you had that problem?
No.
You have to be, I don't know that it's ever really happened here, but there's always somebody that will talk, but maybe have some very direct questions. And Sally, what did you think? Or Steve, tell me what this was. And you're going to have to draw them out specifically.
Couple of ideas that I came up with is to have participants write a 5-word summary of their thoughts about the book and then share those aloud. Or depending on how many people you have, you probably need at least 6 people. Just put them in pairs or groups of 2 and 3 and have them talk in those small groups, maybe. And then again, examine your questions. Are your questions too deep? Are they unclear? Do they limit the discussion by making assumptions? So, yeah, and some people just prefer to listen than talk. Just acknowledge that fact too. Don't force somebody to talk, but of course you do want people to feel that their opinions and their comments are valued. So it's kind of a fine line you walk there between encouraging someone to participate and then respecting their personality. So what the opposite of that then is you've got one person that just blabbers away and doesn't give anybody else the time to speak up. What do you do about that? Have you ever had that situation?
I think this is probably more common for most of us is having somebody that monopolizes the conversation. Just a strong personality. Sometimes they can say things that bother somebody else. You never know what the situation might be, but I think, it's just you just have to remember that sometimes you have to redirect, and sometimes you may have to interrupt too, which, is a careful thing to do, but generally you can gauge the situation around you you can kind of see who else might want to be saying something, who's kind of like, trying to, and so you can always look at that person and say, hey, it looked like maybe you had a comment that you wanted to say. What did you think about that? And just, trying to redirect as much as possible. But that's a tricky one because that happens a lot, I think, in most book clubs.
I think I've seen this done in other groups where the facilitator or the leader will say, Mary, I appreciate all your comments. We've heard from you. Let's hear from somebody else. Kind of a polite way of saying, you've had your turn. Be quiet now.
Done.
Have any of you ever had somebody in the group who is a bit of a bully? This came up at a recent county meeting. They said one person would belittle other people's opinions and ideas, and it was becoming quite serious that people were actually getting their feelings hurt. Has anybody ever had that happen?
No. The only thing remotely close to that is I'll have somebody that gets really wrapped up in a character they don't like, and they'll bully the book or bully a character perhaps, but fortunately not amongst each other in a group. That would be a very difficult situation.
Yeah, this was true story. Happened to in a library in my district, and the librarian contacted me and said, what do I do? And I'm like you, Kathy, I had not seen this happen in any groups I had previously led. I advised the director, you need to talk one-on-one with the person. Maybe the person doesn't realize that the comments are coming across in a way that are hurting other people. And then I recommended that when the new season starts, whenever your book club, maybe in the fall or maybe in the spring, whatever, establish some ground rules that include respecting others' opinions.
Yeah.
This again came from real librarians that I've been talking with recently, and one of them said that she was frustrated because her book discussion group was pretty much just a gossip group. They tended to want to not talk about the book, but just gossip about things. Anybody been there, done that, had that issue?
I don't say our group as a whole has that, but we have a member in our morning monthly group that she will go down that path every time. Yeah. Fortunately, the rest of the group just kind of nods and smiles, and we ask a question about the book again and can dive back in. But if I had 2 or 3 of her, yeah. But there again, I think you have to set those ground rules, like you said, with we're here to talk about the book, and maybe you have to repeat that.
And we are close to ending our time here, so I'm going to zip through these last few slides. This one, what do you do if people hated the book? And I was talking with Kathy just yesterday, and she said, and I've had this experience too, that was some of the best discussion we've ever had in a book group, was when everybody hated the book. So don't think that's going to automatically mean it's disaster. Maintaining the momentum, just getting the marketing out there. Mindy, you mentioned word of mouth. I think that's a great way to promote your book club. Maybe each one bring one. If you ever need funding, a lot of you talked about partnering with some of the businesses in your community. And Jen, you said you have people who pay for the books that you distribute to all the kids. So it is possible to find the funding out there from people who are willing to promote something like this. And we already talked about having those special tie-in programs, whether that's having an online author visit virtually, or maybe just watching one of the recordings that the authors have done online, maybe watching the movie version of the book after you've read and discussed the book, or maybe that's the topic of a special book club where you read the book 1 month and you come back the next month to watch the film. Doing art projects or cooking something. Those are all ways to expand the book beyond just the discussion. You can see some ideas here, as well as a program known as Read for Action. And this is about a book club where you read a novel and then you connect with authors, scholars, and humanitarian experts to take action, conduct research, and influence public policy. So the website is there from that link, and I'll have that in the slides when we share those. So that's kind of interesting. Let's just say you read something about planting flowers, and then your group goes out and plants flowers in the community. That would be a really cool way to expand your discussion. Lots of partner options out there, and we've done a lot of Q&A already. But Scott, do we have any burning questions in our last remaining minute or two here?
There are questions. I don't know how burning they are.
And I will just say now, because I know we're at the end of our time, if you have to go, we understand that. And if you registered for this in Iowa Learns, you will be able to get your credit for that. Give us a few days to get that accomplished. We will be posting the slides and the recording to Iowa Learns and our YouTube channel. And for those of you that can stay, and our panelists, if you don't mind hanging around for just a few more minutes, Scott, go ahead and toss those questions our way.
Okay. The first one was quite a while ago. I think this actually was back after Jennifer's part, and it says, how do you make sure they've read the book before going on the field trip?
It really is just honor system. A lot of times the parents know, because the parents are the ones signing them up and have their field trip permission slips to sign, so they know if their kids have read it or not. And so I've had times where the parents are like, nope, sorry, they're not going, they didn't finish the book, and that's, you know, up to them. But we just have to trust what they tell us.
You don't make them pass a 30-question test. All right, other
I
question.
think you might have answered this one about having one or two people domineering the conversation. Is there a polite way to cut the person off? I think we kind of talked.
Yeah,
about
we kind of mentioned that. And another way is, if you have to, I would do this as a last resort. I would get an egg timer.
I was just
And I
thinking
would
the same thing.
I would say, okay, whenever somebody offers to speak, this is how much time you get. Flip it over, and when the sand's gone, they're done. And then you pass it on to
Especially-
somebody else.
There were some comments there where you have groups of 15, 16. I think that would be an easy thing to incorporate in those larger
Right.
groups. Just, hey,
Yeah.
there's a lot of us and everybody needs a chance.
Mm-hmm.
That could help limit.
I was also thinking when you were talking about breaking even people up into groups of 2 or 3, but if you have groups of 15 or 20, a great strategy would even to be come up with if there were little discussion question sets, and those could be generic or specific to the book, or if you just had questions and then you broke people into groups and you rotated it around, and
Right.
you were in different groups for different times. That is also a neat way that might help people who were shyer about speaking in a larger group.
Yeah. Or you could break them into those groups of 2 or 3, and then you give each group a specific question from your list, and the
And come
people in the
back.
group discuss that question instead of everybody in the group discussing every single question.
Yeah, and maybe that group even, like sometimes this is like kind of a classroom thing, but they focus on those different things, and then maybe they present, to some of the other groups, like, this is what we talked about, and it can be really neat. You say, Susan really had this great point, encourages you to really listen to each other.
Right. Another question, Scott?
Yeah. How do you handle a group who's very overachieving and complete the books? I feel like it intimidates other members.
I don't know if that was related to Slater's program with the overachievers, and you addressed that earlier.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, these were these were back just after 2 o'clock, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
I think we got the larger group questions.
I think the goal is that people do finish the book. It's more not intimidating those that don't. But
Mhm.
that's,
Yeah.
I don't know if you finish the book, you're actually being an overachiever. You just finished the assignment.
Mhm.
That's
That
my
might have been for Jen's
yeah. For the
situation.
more
I did
kids.
ask that question. We talked about that.
Could have been.
Marianne, you were talking about people hating the book, and I just wanted to share super quickly. One of my very favorite experiences I've had so far as a librarian is that this monthly book group, which is primarily women over 60, read the All Iowa Reads this year, and as a general group hated it. And we had a discussion, and it was and then, but they have an agreement with a local high school teacher, and she has her AP English classes read the same book.
Uh-huh.
The members of the group from our book club who are available go, and then their high school teacher leads a group discussion. And I was able to do that. And it was so neat because these high schoolers had a far different experience reading this book.
Uh-huh.
We also took time to discuss it on a regular basis, kind of chapter by chapter, and had really dissected it and all of these things. But their emotional feelings and the things that they had to say were like so meaningful. And I really do think that some of these members from our book group left that discussion with those teenagers thinking, and I even left it thinking, I want to read this book again. Right. And so I don't know how often that's possible, but bringing kind of those two different generations together and partnering with the school in that way.
That's a neat story. I love that.
So that's just something to think about too, that I've heard a lot of negative things about this All Iowa Reads book, but that was for adults, but I will say that those teens, the way they found meaning in it had really changed my mind about it, and that was really cool.
Interesting.
Neat. Okay, did we get everything covered?
We got more. There's quite a few here. Well, I'm going through it. I think there's more. There's one more at least. For staff members that lead the book club, do they just volunteer their time to read the book?
Oh, that's a good question. As a former manager, I would say that if you have to have this book read to do your job, you should be able to read that book on the job. That's
I've let people do that before.
yeah.
I wish you were my boss, Mary. No, it's a volunteer thing where we work. You do it on your own time.
But as we said, it is possible to lead a book discussion, to facilitate a book discussion without having read the book. So I suppose if your manager said, well, technically you don't have to read the book, so you have to do it on your own time. But I wouldn't have any qualms if one of my employees was reading the book discussion title 10, 15 minutes on the job to prepare for the book discussion that the person was leading. So. But I guess that could vary from library to library, and I'm sure we'll get emails about that.
I've another one. How do you handle popular books that weren't available to ILL when they first came out, but months later, many book club members have already read? Do you still go ahead and read it or avoid it since many have read it several months ago?
That's a good question. What do you all do?
We typically avoid it. If it's one that, it's the best national bestseller that everybody's been reading, number one, we're not going to be able to get it on interlibrary loan very easily. And then most of the time, by the time we can, everybody has read it. So we do avoid that. I know you mentioned earlier about like waiting a year. And that's probably what we do, because we do interlibrary loan all of our book club books. And unless you want to buy a set, that's almost what you're going to have to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, we've got our emails up here. So I would say that if you asked a question, and thanks for hanging around with us this long for our little extended time here. If we didn't get to your question, you can contact us and ask your question. We'll be happy to answer it. And as I said earlier, we will be posting a recording and the slides and any resources. I think most of the resources are already on the slides. So Kathy, Mindy, and Jennifer, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed working with all three of you and enjoyed the information. And I know that our audience was really benefited from the information that you shared. And Scott, thanks for filling in as our producer today and catching all the questions. And I hope to hear lots of good stories about more book clubs in Iowa libraries. So thank you all.
Thank you.